All right, my name is Katie Kimball, and I am presenting on the Battle of the Bulge. Some overview. In late 1944, during the wake of Allied forces' successful D-Day invasion of Normandy, France, it seemed that the Second World War was almost over. On December 16th, with the onset of winter, the German army launched a counteroffensive that was intended to cut through most of the Allied forces in a manner that would turn the tide of the war in Hitler's favor. The battle that ensued is known historically as the Battle of the Bulge. At the time of the battle, the political climate in Europe was heavily influenced by the ongoing war, as the Allied powers, which was led by the United States, United Kingdom, and Soviet Union, were pushing to defeat the Axis powers led by Germany, Italy, and Japan. The battle was a last-ditch effort by Germany to stop the Allied advance and to turn the tide of the war in their favor. So, the commanders. The Battle of the Bulge was commanded by several key people on both Allied and German sides. On the Allied side, the overall commander was General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the supreme commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force, seen on the far left. The field commander was General Omar Bradley, who was the commander of the U.S. 12th Army Group, seen in the middle, as well as Lieutenant General George S. Patton Jr., seen on the right. On the German side, the operation was planned and led by the commander of the German armed forces, Adolf Hitler, seen on the far left. The field commander was Gerd von Rundstedt, commander of the German Army Group B. And then the operation was also led by other German generals such as Hasso von Manteuffel, I believe, Manteuffel, sorry, seen in the middle right, and Sef Dietrich, which is the far right. So some of Hitler's plans were to confuse and distract the Allied forces, but he chose mid-December for the attack because of the freezing temperatures that could help the Germans fight the Allied forces by with the ground being frozen, tanks were easier to get through the area, as well as lots of injured soldiers due to frostbite, trench foot, that kind of thing, pneumonia. This ended in 15,000 American cold injuries, which is what I just listed. Another tactic that the Germans used was trying to infiltrate the Allied forces. The commanders sent German soldiers dressed in American clothes who spoke English to infiltrate and confuse American troops. This didn't end up working, and most, if not all, I believe most of the soldiers involved got taken in and killed for that, which I believe is a war crime. And then, as well as that, they also would come in and change road signs, and capture bridges, cut communications lines, spread rumors, all kinds of things to cause chaos, to confuse, and ultimately just, yeah, confuse chaos. Confusing, yeah. So the play-by-play. In December 16th, 1944, the Germans launched a major attack. Excuse me. It's been a long day. A major attack on the Allied forces in the Ardennes. 200,000 German troops and almost 1,000 tanks snuck into the Ardennes forest that was being held by 4 American divisions that were inexperienced and battle-worn. Most of the soldiers, the Allied soldiers that were placed there, it was mostly to rest up, as well as hold the line, of course, since that area that they were holding had not seen very much battle at that point, not much attack. After about a day of hard fighting, German troops broke through the American front, surrounding an infantry division in a city, as well as seizing key crossroads, advancing their spearheads toward the Meuse River. And then the Supreme Allied Commander, General Dwight D. Eisenhower, rushed to send reinforcements to hold the American troops during the German penetration. Here we have a, let's see if here we go. Maybe not. Sorry. Here we can see a map. This blue line here on the right side is where the Allied front lines was. And the red direct line, the little squiggly thing, is where the German penetration was. On this right side over here, you can see the different companies and units that the Germans used. We have the 15th, and we have the 6th, 5th, and 7th armies. And then we also have, on the dotted red lines, we have the objectives of where they were trying to get to. As you can see, they did not make it that far. The original, I will go into this more in just a second. The original plan was to take Eisenborn, which is right at the very beginning behind the blue line, which they did not get, and then go all the way out to this far left upper side at Antwerp. That is where they were all trying to get to. And I will go into that in just a second, but obviously they did not make it. So the play-by-play continues. Within days, Lieutenant General George S. Patton Jr. turned his 3rd U.S. Army to the north and started a counterattack on the German flank. Sorry. You can't, it doesn't say it here, but that would be the 7th Army that he's attacking, which, as you'll see later, is probably the weakest of the armies. And so that was very bad positioning on the Germans' part. On December 18th, the 101st Airborne Division was surrounded by the Germans at Bastogne, which is the city that I mentioned earlier. But they held it out for 7 days until there were replacements that came in and helped them out. Patton's Third Army relieved Bastogne, and north, the Second U.S. Armored Division stopped the German tanks just short of the Meuse River on Christmas of 1944. Through January of 1945, the American troops suffered the freezing cold and attacking the sides of the shrinking Bulge until they have restored the front on January 25th. German combat tactics. So Hitler's plan was to break through the Allied lines and capture the city of Antwerp. He planned on using the bad weather so that the Allies cannot use their superior air force, which would have caused total disaster for the Germans at that point in time. And you'll see it does. The plan was for the 6th Panzer Army, Panzer meaning mostly civilians that were asked to join last minute because Germany was running very low on people and supplies. So the 6th Panzer Army to cross the Meuse and take Antwerp. The 5th Panzer Army was to establish a front line around Brussels, and the 7th Army would take on the southern sector by advancing to Luxembourg and southern Belgium and set up defenses. The 6th SS Panzer Army doesn't achieve that. They don't even achieve their first objective, which is taken the Elsenborn Ridge, which is what I pointed out earlier. There are very few roads in the woods that they were in, and so moving was very slow, and they ended up sending in their reserves far too early to try and break through the line of Allied forces, but it ended up just making things slower. The 5th SS Panzer Army had much more luck because the Allied forces were spread very thin throughout that whole region. And so they were able to break through basically everywhere that they set out to break through. The 7th Army's spearheads attack the Our and Sur, I don't know, rivers, and suffered only light casualties. But due to the lack of supplies and equipment, most of the army is still stuck on the eastern banks of the rivers. That plus the Allies were very good at shooting and were keeping most of them over on that side. So then we've got some Allied tactics. The 1st Army was on their way to the Ruhr River dams to advance the troops. And the 3rd Army planned to strike towards the Saar region. General Omar Bradley stretched the forces very thin. So one is way up and the other is way down, and they're trying to go through the lines out. I believe there's a map on the next page, I think. So we'll see. And then there was a crisis meeting for the Allies on December 20th, trying to decide whether to transfer American forces up north to British control, which they ended up doing, under Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery's 21st Army Group. This eventually helps the Americans because they're able to get more troops into the field faster and more efficiently. Here we are. So this, well, kind of. This blue line here in the center, the little squiggly, that's Bastogne, which is the city that was surrounded by the German fleet that had, I don't think I wrote it down, but I think it had about 15,000 soldiers, Allied soldiers in it, if I remember that correctly. And they were able to hold out for 7 days until eventually the reinforcements came up and were able to break through the arrows that you see here, which are the Germans. I'm actually going to go back for a second and show you on the last, here we go. So the, ooh, you can see up here the Roer River, which is where the Allied forces were going to try and get through. And also down here, I do not think that it's marked, but down towards the bottom, past like where the 7th Army is where that second group was supposed to go. So you can see all of that space in between was very thin, didn't have a lot of people in it defending it, which is why you can see here the 5th, which is this middle region, was able to be a lot more successful than both the 6th and the 7th armies were. Okay, continuing on. So here we have the Allied combat units, which we have the 101st Airborne Division, which is one of the better well-known units. And then we have the 3rd Army's 8th Corps, which is under Troy Middleton. And then the 1st Army's 5th Corps under Leonard Garreau. And then we have Bernard Montgomery's 21st Army and the 12th Army Group under Omar Bradley. Then we have the German combat units. We have Hasse von Manteuffel, the 5th SS Panzer Army. And they had about 400 tanks and about 963 guns. That is the group that managed to make it all the way through the farthest. And then we have Seb Dietrich's 6th SS Panzer Army, who had 500 tanks and over 1,000 guns. And then we have Erich Brandenburger, 7th Army, who had no tanks whatsoever and only 319 guns. As you can see, the 7th Army is way under what the other two have. And then also, this is more of a side note, but also during this, we have the Kampfgruppe Piper under Commander Johann Piper. This was a specific unit of Germans who were considered the most deadly during that time. They shot 19 Allied prisoners at Honsfeld, 59 at Bullingen, 44 at Stoumont, and 58 at Ligneuville. So as you can see, well over 100 altogether there, just from this one group during this one period of time, which was quite a lot. So then we got some pictures. These are the Allied forces. We've got some buried deep in foxholes. in the snow. This was just kind of what their conditions were like. Wanted to give more of a visual to that. So the results of the battle. We had 1 million plus Allied troops, including over 500,000 Americans, fought in the Battle of the Bulge. Over 19,000 soldiers were killed in action, while 47,500 were wounded and 23,000 went missing. About 100,000 Germans were killed, wounded, or captured. Winston Churchill called the battle the greatest American battle of the war. And Allied forces then continued to march into Berlin, and after about 5 more months, Germany surrendered. Here's some statistics. Got the Americans with 8,600 dead, 21,000 missing, 47,000 wounded, and 20,000 non-battle injuries, such as trench foot and all that other stuff that I mentioned earlier. We have Germans. We have 15,500 dead, 27,500 missing, and 42,000 wounded. And then side note, but also important to note, we have 2,500 Belgians dead, and 500 Luxembourgers dead as well. So those are just civilians that were killed in action. So the conclusions: the panzer armies were not trained or prepared enough for the battles. And because of the last of the German supplies that were wasted in this battle, it ultimately led to Germany's defeat just a few months later. The Ardennes offensive, which is also considered the Battle of the Bulge, was one of the most critical battles for both the Allied and German sides. All right. Thank you.